All right, guys, the Seattle Seahawks have officially made history. And we got to take some time to talk about that because you don't make history all that often. Making history is something that only comes around every now and then, and it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of focus. So, Seahawks made history yesterday, and not only did they make history, the Seahawks also set themselves up to now officially be on pace to make history by the end of the season. So let's break it down and talk about it. I'm talking about this defense mostly, but first of all, let's just quickly talk about the history that we made yesterday. The Seattle Seahawks lost 4 games in a row for the first time with Pete Carroll as the head coach. For the first time ever. Even in 2010, when the team was awful, we had no talent, and he was taking over Jim Mora Jr.'s team and Mike Holmgren's team, and there was no salary cap, and there was no opportunity to really improve the roster, and he was just working with whatever little scraps he could put together. That team had every right to go like 2-14, 3-13, and go on some kind of 7 or 8 game losing streak. Never happened. They never lost 4 in a row. The team in 2021 that had an injured quarterback, that had all kinds of schematic deficiencies, that ended up going 5-10 at one point that season. That team never lost 4 in a row until yesterday. Pete Carroll had never lost 4 in a row. He has lost 4 in a row. And for the first time since Jim Mora Jr. was the Seahawks head coach, we are looking at a flat month worth of winless football. So that's obviously its own kind of history. But I have a feeling that 8 days from now, we're going to be talking about a 5 game losing streak. So a week from now, it's not even going to seem like that big of a deal. So let's put that to the side for a minute here, because there's another kind of history that the Seahawks are now on pace to make. They may not get there, but as of right now, they are on track to do it. And I'm talking about specifically the defense here. And in some regard, the losing streak is on the head of the defense, because it's been the defense that has been the main reason why we've been losing these games, I think. The defense has been mostly terrible during this 4 game stretch. But it's not just the last 4 games, it's the big picture. The big picture of this defense is on track to make history as well. So, what I have pulled up here is every NFL defense ranked by points allowed per game. And this is something that I've gone back to a few times this year, because I think that watching the team, every single snap, every single drive, every single quarter, every single game they play, it's easy to get lost in perception, and you need to occasionally ground yourself with reality. And I think it's important to filter everything you think about this defense through the very simple baseline question of how many points are they allowing other teams to score. Allowing points is not necessarily the end-all be-all, but it is most of the battle. I think we can all agree there. If you're allowing other teams to score a lot of points, you're not a good defense. If you're allowing teams to not score very many points, you're a good defense. I don't think that should be a controversial statement. So, if you go to the rankings in terms of points allowed per game for each defense right now, you got to scroll all the way to the bottom to get this to the Seahawks, and you can see the Seattle Seahawks are currently bottom 5 in scoring defense. They allow, after the game yesterday, 24.5 points per game. Only the Colts, Cardinals, Panthers, and Commanders are worse. Now, I will say this, and maybe this is a sweet relief to the Seahawks organization right now, to Pete Carroll, to Clint Hurt, to every player on that defense. This chart has not yet accounted for the Eagles game last night. And the Eagles actually allowed 33 points, which means they have now allowed 3 more points on the season than the Seahawks. So once this chart updates, the Seahawks will actually be the 6th worst. The Eagles will bump a little bit below them. So that would put them at 27th in the NFL in points allowed. And the Giants haven't played yet. And you can see the Giants have allowed 24.3 points per game. So if the Giants defense allows 27 points or more tonight when they play the Packers, they too would go below us. And that would put us at 26th. However, none of that actually matters because 26th would still be making history. And if the Seahawks maintain their current pace and maintain that ranking, even if it goes up to 26th, that would still be the worst that Pete Carroll has ever done with his defense since he arrived in Seattle. Going into this year, the worst he had ever done was 25th in points allowed, which he did in 2010, and then he did it again last year. So as of right now, we're 27th. Even if we go up to 26th after tonight, we're still last. So we are now officially on pace to make another kind of history. We are on pace to have the worst points allowed per game ranking in the history of Pete Carroll's tenure in Seattle. So we can now officially say, with no caveats, no hyperbole, no assumptions, this is the worst defense that Pete Carroll has ever put together in Seattle. And we can do the exact same thing for yards. If you go over to the total defense stats sorted by yards allowed per game, you scroll down to the bottom here, the Seahawks are currently 5th worst, which would put them at 28th. Now, again, the Giants are right in front of them, and if the Giants give up, I think, something like 400 yards tonight or more, they would go below us, and we would then be 27th. Would 27th be the worst that Pete Carroll has ever done? Not quite. He equaled that in 2010, and he was actually one spot worse than that in 2021. But as of right now, we are 28th. Pending the results of the Giants game tonight, we are 28th, which is tied for the worst result of the Pete Carroll era. He managed 28th in 2021. So we are now on pace to make history in both areas. And you mash those two numbers together. You mash those two numbers together, and I think you now have a entirely factual and undisputed argument that the Seattle Seahawks are on pace to have the worst defense they have ever had with Pete Carroll as the head coach. And obviously, just on the surface of it, that's really bad. That's pathetic. That's embarrassing. He should be ashamed of himself. The players on the defense should be ashamed of themselves. Clint Hurt should be ashamed of themselves. And it's just all the way around really, really bad that we're here right now. But I want to spend a little bit more time on that because you look at the way our defenses have ranked over the past decade plus, the Pete Carroll era. You have all these seasons where the defense was elite, the Legion of Boom era when the Legion of Boom was relatively healthy. You have these seasons here where the defense was a little above average. They were decent, they were workable. You have the years where the defense was bad, like 2019, last year, this year, the first year. You have years where the defense was average, like 2020, 2021. You have years where the defense was good but not quite great yet, like 2011. And then you sort them out and you think about comparing within those categories. You compare this defense to other defenses. So let's take the 2023 defense, the defense that we're sitting on right now, which, as I just said, is on pace to be the worst defense Pete Carroll has ever put together since he got to Seattle. And I want to compare it to the 2010 defense, the defense that was basically inherited from Jim Mora Jr. and Mike Holmgren, and that didn't really have the ability to get better, so Pete Carroll just kind of had to work with it the best that he could until he could get out from under some of those contracts and bring in new players that are more his style. So, 2010. Let's take a look at the top players on this defense. The best player on this defense might have been David Hawthorne. Remember the Hawthorne missile? I do. He was fun. But when he's your best player, a guy who would go on to be a relatively small consequence player on the Saints after his Seahawks career was over, you've got a problem. Lofa Tatupu, right before his legs basically fell off, was another high-profile player on this defense. Lawyer Malloy, in the final year of his career, 37 years old, one of the key players on this defense. Marcus Trufant on the cusp of being washed up. Earl Thomas in his rookie season, and go read some of the stuff that Earl Thomas said about his rookie season, about how lost he was. You've got Aaron Curry, one of the Aaron Curry years. Remember him? You got Chris Clemens, probably the he would go on to be probably the best player that this defense actually had this year. Big play Babineau. That was fun, but when he's one of your key players on defense, that's not something that's going to produce good results. Colin Cole, you got Kentwan Balmer. I don't even really remember Kentwan Balmer. Kelly Jennings, probably the most disgusted Pete Carroll has ever been with any cornerback he's ever coached. You've got guys like Brandon Mebane. He was obviously good, but he only played 12 games that year. Cam Chancellor wasn't really playing on the defense yet. You've got Red Bryant, only played 7 games. He was a good player, but missed a majority of this season with an injury. And yeah, like, where is the star power here? How is it that this defense is better than the current defense? Most of the guys on this team are either too young or too old or just plain not good. Like, the guys on this defense who were genuinely good would be like, I think Chris Clemens and probably Brandon Mebane, maybe Raheem Brock, but I Raheem Brock was at the end of the line as well. Like, this is a defense loaded with just random parts slapped together. It makes all the sense in the world why this defense would be bad. This defense, this Seahawks defense, has the most expensive safeties in the NFL by far. It has a Pro Bowl second year cornerback and the number 5 overall pick at cornerback. It has Bobby Wagner, future Hall of Famer. It has first round picks in guys like Jordan Brooks. It's got a bunch of stuff invested into the edge. I know Nwosu's hurt, but you've still got a bunch of former second round picks at edge. You've got the trade investment you made in Leonard Williams, who is a very good player. You've got Jaron Reed having a career year. You've got all these things invested into this defense. Guys who are very good players because they've proven it here or, and in some cases, and elsewhere. Jamal Adams was on a Hall of Fame track at one point over in New York. And look at how bad he looks for us. Quandre Diggs, we know how good he's been here for years, and then suddenly he looks as bad as he looks, and the defense doesn't really get any benefit from having him right now. So, how are we sitting here right now with the same coach looking at the talent we have on our defense, comparing it to the talent on this defense? This defense is practically devoid of talent. This defense is one of the saddest collections of players that I've ever seen. Some of these guys would become good. Some of these guys were good. But at this point in time, when this season happened, Chris Clemens and David Hawthorne were really the only 2 guys who gave you anything that felt like it was even a little above average. And somehow, our coach was able to bring that group together to not be awful. And now that same coach has so much more talent. And I don't care if you think our talent is overrated. That's at least arguable. Maybe the Seahawks defensive players aren't as good as we think, but I would bet money that the talent we have on this defense is way better than this 2010 defense. And yet the results are actually a little bit worse. So I just really want to highlight that. I want to let people really think about that. I want to let people digest that, because this, to me, is the reason why Pete Carroll needs to go. This is the ultimate proof that Pete Carroll is washed up and cannot do it anymore. He got this group to better results than he's getting the Seahawks to right now with their group. So we are probably a week away from going down into like the bottom 3, because I'm sure the Eagles are going to beat us, so they would jump us then, and we'll probably get jumped by a couple other teams as well. So it's only going to get worse before it gets better. See you guys later. Go Hawks. I'm just trying to give people some stuff to think about. I want to put this in context. This defense, with all this talent, with all these high draft picks, with all the money we've spent, all the trades we've made, is worse than the 2010 defense that Pete Carroll probably didn't even want. Like, he probably wanted to just cut everybody immediately, but he couldn't because he needed to field a team for the 2010 season. Like, it was that bad. I was there. I watched the 2010 Seahawks. That was a defense mostly devoid of talent. So, if that doesn't highlight how big a failure this is, whatever little you think of our defensive talent right now, our players on defense, if you think Witherspoon's overrated and Woolen was a one-hit wonder and Maffei's not playing that good right now, or Leonard Williams is overrated, it's still way better than what we had in 2010. And yet, here we are, somehow, some way, compared to the rest of the league, worse. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Oh boy. It's not fun right now. There's nothing fun about this. There's nothing fun about watching this defense play this poorly, and I want it to be over. And I really just look at things like this and I think it has nothing to do with the players. The players have nothing to do with this, or they have so little to do with it, it doesn't even matter. This is all about coaching. This is all about scheme. And it's not going to get better with this current regime. See you guys later. Go Hawks for real this time. More videos coming later, but wow.